Good afternoon. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will be answering questions as we go along, and you can type them into the question box. If you have further questions after the webinar has ended, please feel free to email them to me, and I will forward them to the appropriate person that can answer them. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under Professional Development. And now I'd like to introduce Patrice McCarthy, Executive Director and General Counsel for CABE.
Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And you are embarking on a very exciting journey as a candidate for your Board of Education, a very important role in each of our towns and cities in Connecticut. We're going to begin this afternoon's program with our first Vice President, Leonard Lockhart. Leonard is a member of the Windsor Board of Education and has chaired our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for several years. Leonard is an experienced board member. He has previously served as board chair in Windsor. And I'm going to turn it over to Leonard to give you some insights from a seasoned board member. Leonard?
Thank you very much, Patrice. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the CABE staff. Thank you for, or good afternoon, should I say. Thank you for providing this opportunity. My name is Leonard Lockhart. I humbly serve the town of Windsor as Vice President of the Board of Education. I've been serving since January of 2012. I started as an appointment to fill a vacancy, and I've earned 5 terms on my own since then, and currently on the campaign trail as many of you. So as you know, serving in any capacity, no matter what it is, it takes a level of personal sacrifice and a level of preparation to do any type of task that you're doing. Board of Ed is no different. In the state of Connecticut, Board of Education members do not get paid. It is one of the most hardest working positions, I believe, in local government, to say the least. And you are responsible for setting policy, curriculum, appropriations for a school board or school district, as well as supervising as a collective one employee, and that is the superintendent. So what that takes is a lot of commitment to reading, stand up on your professional development, and really stand in tune with the local, state, and national narrative as it comes to education. It doesn't matter if what political party you are. At the end of the day, we are responsible by the oath that we take with the state of Connecticut that we are to be advocates for public education in the state of Connecticut. That's per the state constitution. It takes a lot to run. It takes a lot to go and door knock and to share your vision with your electorate. It's an understanding that you're not tied to a political party, but you are representing every single child in public education within your district or your town or city. The commitment, if you are a professional with a paying job, it definitely sometimes nip into your professional work. There's a lot of times there's meetings during the day. There's a lot of times superintendent may have to raise a point to you and to seek your guidance. As you move up the leadership chain, there's definitely times where you definitely have to be the face of the board in regards to different associations. You may want to go and lobby your town council, your town of selectmen. You may even want to go and lobby your representatives at the Connecticut General Assembly. And a lot of times that's done during 9 to 5. That's not something you can do off hours. A lot of the meetings are off hours for board members, but I want you to be mindful of the fact, and on lieu of all of that, there's a lot of reading that goes on to prepare for a board meeting. You get a packet at least once a month. Some districts meet twice a month, but at least you meet once a month, and you are to deliberate all of the actions of the school district. Remember, as a board member, you are macro-managing the school district. The superintendent is responsible for micromanaging the school district. You supervise only one employee. So when you're making decisions, you have to understand the role of the superintendent, You have to understand the role of collective bargaining and what you can say and not say. You have to be very mindful of the fact that you just have to be prepared. And painfully so, there's a lot of board members that come to meetings not prepared, and it shows in some of the line of questioning. It shows when you come in, and the worst sound you can hear as a Board of Ed member is to hear that packet opening for the first time before the meeting. A lot of districts are going green, and so a lot of people are reading the stuff on board book electronically before they get to the meeting as well. So that misconception is slowly fading away. But it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes you really, really getting into the schools, meeting with the parents, engaging with the PTOs, engaging with the teachers, and just not necessarily asking probing questions, but asking, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What can I do for you as a board member from my seat? Remember, we're not there to solve personal problems for families, for our personal children, stuff like that. That's not our role. Our role is to make sure that the superintendent is following the policies and procedures, is following the curriculum that the board has approved, and to make sure that the appropriations that he or she is asking for is advocated for and allocated. And if it's not allocated, how do you work with that said superintendent to make it work, to make sure that they can properly educate every single child in your district while making sure that they take care of all of the employees under his or her leadership? That's a lot of work. I said a lot to say this. Superintendents appreciate board members, whether they agree with them or not, that come prepared for board meetings. They come prepared to be able to understand the bylaws, and that they understand the curriculum, and they understand what the appropriation piece is, so that when you're making decisions, you're not doing anything that's in violation of any of those, as well as any collective bargaining units. That's very important. And one final thing before I open it up for questions is the relationship between the board president and the superintendent. That is a very special relationship that every superintendent holds dear to them. You can have a very political board or a very smooth sailing board, but it is up to the board chair to facilitate the work of the board to the superintendent to make sure that it's articulated properly, and to make sure that any issues that the superintendent have or may need to address, it's articulated back to the board. So there's a lot of times board members want to go directly to the principal. They want to go to the HR person. They want to go directly to the business director. That is not our role. That's only granted to you if the superintendent says, yes, you have the ability to do so, with the understanding that only the collective 9, 7, 5, whatever it is in your district are the ones that's able to make the decisions. That takes a lot of time. I can tell you on average, over this past 4 years, I'm probably averaging about 20 to 30 hours a week just on Board of Education stuff. And that's what I'm doing on the local level, the state level with CABE, as well as the national level with NSBA. I'm doing about 30 hours a week, and that's 7 days a week. And that's outside of the emails, the phone calls that I field, and just to make sure when the legislature is in session, we go up there and we advocate for CABE. We go up there and advocate for the town of Windsor. All that and studying on weekends, getting ready for the next week's meetings, that takes a lot of time and personal discipline to be prepared for that type of stuff. So it's not something that you can just wake up, wash your face, jump on the bike and roll away. If you're that talented, you need to teach me how to do that. Haven't mastered that yet. I like to be prepared, and when I speak, I would like to hopefully give the stronger parents that I know exactly what I'm talking about, but I do so with humility because I'm learning every day. So I'll pause right there, Patrice and Will Marie, see if there's any questions in the queue or if there's any comments that wish to be made before I continue.
We don't have any questions at this time, but I'll give it a few minutes.
So while we're giving it a few minutes, I know in the town of Windsor, if you are in the executive committee, we're required to be in our seats a half hour before the start of a meeting. And that gives the public an opportunity to customer face, what I call customer face with us. where they can come, whether it's teachers, staff, the public, can come and talk with us. We have to be mindful of the fact that Board of Ed meetings are meetings of the board in public. It's not a meeting with the public. It is a board meeting in public. And there's certain opportunities on your regular agenda or committee agenda where you allow audience to visitors. But for the most part, it's not a meeting with the public. It's the Board of Ed conducting the business in a public arena so that everybody is understanding what we're doing from a transparency standpoint.
Okay. Leonard, we do have one question here.
Yes, ma'am.
It reads, can you speak more about your diversity and inclusion work?
Yes, thank you for the question. So what I've done as DEI chair is we've tried to really expand at different groups. It could be based off of your identity as far as color. It could be male, female. We've really tried to dive in to see exactly how does the diversity of our workforce in the state of Connecticut can impact education in the state of Connecticut. We've done a deep dive into women in education and really took a dive about how originally education in America used to be a white male profession. And then when we went through the industrial phase of the country, a lot of the white males went to go into those particular jobs. And the perception was that white women started becoming the teachers of America and moving forth. And sadly, that is the perception of today. And we've also discussed the fact that there's the perception is that males are the ones that are the leading administrators and superintendents in the world. So we talked about that type of diversity and perceptions and how do we address that and how do we get more diversity in the classroom from a male-female perspective, from an African-American, from a Spanish, from an Asian, any type of culture or race that you may identify as. How do we make sure that you are properly represented in the decision making as well as what's being taught in the classroom, as well as who is teaching you in the classroom? So those are some of the things that CABE has addressed head on under the DEI, and we will continue to have the difficult conversations and make sure that we're advocating for that type of stuff, for change and for investment in that change at the CGA, which is Connecticut General Assembly. Patrice, did I miss anything?
No, Leonard, I think you covered it very well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions here.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak about engaging parents and how, as a Board of Education member, you work to engage parents in the district activities? Too often in our town, we find that parents are not engaged in the process of the Board of Ed.
Thank you for the question. So what we try to do, at least in Windsor, is we try to promote our meetings as well as promote the committee meetings. We have everything posted on our website, which is required by law. Too often, parents only come out when it's something directly impacting them. And we understand that. We're in the business of education, and a happy parent is a parent that typically will not come around and bother you too much. When we engage parents, we have to make sure that we come from a very empathetic stance. We got two ears and two eyes and one mouth for a reason. We have to listen, we have to read, we have to express empathy. We at times may be the focal point where people are venting, and it's really not directly at you, but it's the situation. And you are the elected official to engage with that. We try to encourage people to come to our meetings. Our particular superintendent engages the public with what he calls coffee chats, where he tries to engage the public outside of a board meeting where we're not able to talk back and forth with the public. We also have board members that are assigned to particular schools within our district to go in those buildings and to be able to engage with the PTOs and the PTAs and really do something different outside of being talked to at a restaurant when you're with your family or you're out grocery shopping, which all board members deal with. But we want to make sure when the public come to you, they're coming to you with the issue that they feel and trust that you can handle, no matter how they may feel about you, and no matter how it may come across when they communicate it to you. You got to deal with the what I would call emotion, and really get to the root of what the issue is and try to help them as best you can. It's a very difficult skill to learn. You have to understand that you are no longer Leonard Lockhart, just a citizen of Windsor. You're Leonard Lockhart, the Board of Education member that was elected by the electorate, and not just by the Democrats, but by the Republicans and the independents in Windsor, to listen and to advocate for all the children in the town of Windsor.
Thank you, Leonard.
Thank you. Is there another question? I thought I heard two.
We do, but you pretty much covered it. It was asking you to speak about your engagement with the community as a whole, but I think you did a really good job of that.
Thank you, too kind. I want to stay on task. We have 12:17. If you want, we can pivot to member roles and responsibility. And if anybody needs my feedback moving forth, I'm willing to chime in during the next two sections.
Thanks so much. And I think everyone can see by Leonard's comments that he epitomizes the engaged and prepared Board of Education member that I know all of you candidates will aspire to be, because that is very important for the well-being of the students in your district and also for the public perception of the Board of Education. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CABE and also go over some of the basics of roles and responsibilities of Board of Education members. So CABE is a nonprofit membership association. We've existed for over 100 years, and we focus on providing education, advocacy, and support to local and regional school board members. We also work very closely with partner groups, particularly the Superintendent's Association, the Commissioner of Education, the Teachers Unions, and the Principals Association. So we have a lot of partnerships because we have a lot of mutual interests. So education consists of professional development opportunities that we offer throughout the year. And that's the good news for you when you become elected to the board. You won't be trying to figure this out all by yourself. You will have your own local Board of Education to provide guidance to you, but we also offer an annual convention, a program for new board members and leadership track in December, and then we offer a series of webinars and in-person meetings throughout the year. Many of our webinars are archived on our CABE website so that you can take advantage of professional development. But if you're not able to participate in real time, you still have those opportunities available. The advocacy that we do is guided by decisions that our members make at an annual delegate assembly and the legislative priorities that our committee of school board members establishes every December. So we advocate at both the state and federal level. Key issues are always around adequate funding for education, as well as making sure that there are not mandates imposed on districts that make it more difficult to meet the educational needs of your students. And the support we provide to every Board of Education that's a member of the association is available by phone, by email, and we go out and work with individual boards of education on a regular basis. We'll provide a workshop for a board, facilitate a retreat, or help them with goal setting, for example. So in Connecticut, school boards fulfill the educational interests of the state that are contained in our state constitution, that there will always be free elementary and secondary education in the state. And the legislature has delegated responsibility for fulfilling that constitutional right to local and regional boards of education. So school board members serve in a unique role. You are, in many respects, agents of the state, even though you are elected within your own community. And we have a number of statutes that govern your roles and responsibilities. And that's the subject of a whole workshop in and of itself. But you have three major responsibilities as a school board. You hire and evaluate your superintendent. You adjust and adopt and modify policies, and Jody is our policy expert, so I'm going to leave that to him. And you adopt and oversee your district budget. Your budget is actually a policy document, because I don't know of any Board of Education in the country that has ever said we have enough funds to implement all of the programs and services that we know our students need. The budget is your opportunity to prioritize within the resources that you have where you're going to allocate those funds, whether you're going to use funds to create smaller class sizes or hire more paraprofessionals to support your students. There are just a myriad of those kinds of decisions that are made through the budget adoption process. So what about your roles and responsibilities? Well, the first thing to remember is that as a Board of Education member, you actually have no greater power individually than any member of your community. A Board of Education only has power when they come together in a duly noticed meeting to take action. Now, part of your challenge will be to help educate your constituents about what your role is and what your role isn't. Because very often, shortly after Election Day, board members are at the soccer field or a basketball game or the Thanksgiving Day football game, and they're approached by a member of the community who says, well, now that you're on the board, you're going to, for example, change that bus stop that you know is unsafe, terminate that third grade teacher that everyone knows is ineffective, remove certain books from the curriculum that you know aren't valuable for the students. The list goes on and on. And what you have to do as a board member is recognize that your role is not to solve that individual's problem. You don't have the authority to do that as an individual. So you need to guide them through the process, understanding the basics of what your policies and procedures provide, so that they know that if they're unhappy about something that's happening in their child's classroom, they need to first talk to the classroom teacher. And if they're still not satisfied with the response, they need to talk to the building principal. And if they're still not satisfied, they should go to the superintendent. So you help the members of your community, not by saying, I'm going to fix that for you, because you don't have the power to do that, but by helping them understand what the process is to have their issue addressed. And you serve as a very important link between those members of the community and the policies and procedures of the school district. Another important part of what you do as a board member is modeling civility for your community and for your colleagues on the board. CABE, a number of years ago, it was actually in 2017, adopted a resolution calling on officials at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, to model civility in all of their actions. And we certainly have seen as a country far too many examples of a lack of civility in many public forums. So you can set a standard of conduct for your community, and remember that your students are always watching, and that by modeling civility and how you interact with your colleagues on the board, with how you interact with members of the public that come to make public comment, even if you disagree with what they might be saying, that element of civility is key to the perception that your community will have of you as a Board of Education and you as an individual board member. You also will come to learn about best practices of boardsmanship. It's important to have a basic understanding of Robert's Rules of Order. I would say the good news is you don't need to be an expert in Robert's Rules. The chairperson of the board is really the person that has to guide the process to make sure that the basics of Robert's Rules, which really are that every member of the body has an opportunity to voice their views, and that the members before a vote understand what it is that they're voting on. It really boils down to that. There are a lot of technicalities around Robert's Rules, but I would say take a deep breath and don't make that your first order of business when you become elected to your board. Jody will probably talk about what your first order of business will be, but we'll leave that as a surprise. Also remember that you are an advocate for public education. You, as a board member, are the only body in town that has the interests of the students as your primary priority. So if you don't advocate for the needs of the school district, there's not another municipal group in your community that has that responsibility. So taking on that advocacy role, helping community members understand the budget, helping them understand why perhaps a school renovation or school construction project is needed, that is all an appropriate role for the Board of Education. And you also will be guided by ethics. You will come to understand what your district policies are around ethical behavior, but basically avoiding not only direct conflicts of interest, but the perception of a conflict of interest will really stand you in good stead and will allow you to maintain your credibility as a local elected official. You have the opportunity when you serve on your Board of Education to be a real leader in your community, and you should celebrate that opportunity. As Leonard said, it is a lot of work, but know that you will have resources behind you, and CABE is one of those resources that you can turn to when you have a question, when you feel the need for some professional development. You will not be out there alone trying to figure this all out. We have a long history of our staff and our elected leaders, our school board members that volunteer not just in their local communities, but at the state level as well to provide you with that support. And we look forward to working with you, and we wish you well in your campaign. So I'll stop and see if there are any questions.
No questions at this moment. We'll give it a couple minutes, a minute or so. Jody, would you like to go on?
Sure. Thanks, Wilmarie.
Right.
And hello, everyone. Just to summarize again what Leonard and Patrice have so perfectly stated, the role of the board member, there are really three key roles. One is to hire and evaluate the superintendent. One is to establish the budget. And the other critical role is around policy. Before I talk too much about policy, my role now is a senior policy associate. Prior to my work at CABE, I was a superintendent for 11 years. So I was one of those people you would be hiring and evaluating. And I, as a superintendent, I really took that part of my role and that relationship I had with the board very seriously. It was through the event. First of all, I was appreciative of the fact that I was hired, but more importantly, the fact that the board was taking time out of their busy lives to evaluate me, and they took that role very seriously. And also it provided me as a superintendent valuable feedback to improve my practice, to ensure I was interfacing with the public in a way that was meaningful and helpful for the district. I was working with my staff. The morale was good, and all those really critical areas that are important for a board and a superintendent. So don't underestimate the importance of the role of evaluating your superintendent. And so prior to being a superintendent for 11 years, I was an assistant superintendent. I was a principal, an assistant principal, a director, language arts, and a teacher. And so I was able to really experience the importance of policy from a variety of perspectives as a person, as an administrator, and as an educator, as a person who would be actually administering policies or working under board policies. And really the difference between policy and administrative regulations would be that the board creates and establishes policy and votes on policy. And policies are designed to last over a period of time. where the administrative regulations are designed to help administer the policy, but they're created by administration to ensure that the policy is being carried out properly. So my role as a senior policy associate is to assist districts in updating their policies, both mandated policies, good practice policies, or policies uniquely tailored for specific districts. And as a senior policy associate and as a policy department, we have a variety of policy services. And I won't get into them too deeply here because at this point, I want to ensure that you still want to become a board member. And it's not a rhetorical question. It's a statement of fact. You want to become a board member. I think the critical piece here is that as members of CABE, there are a lot of services that the policy department provides districts to help ensure that their mandated policies are up to date and they're working for the district, and that there are other services that in terms of we can audit policies and provide specific tailored policy services for districts. So you're not alone in this work. And I think the most critical role we provide, frankly, on a day-to-day basis is we're here to answer questions that come up in your districts related to policies, whether it's around helping clarify a policy, helping to draw the connection between a policy and a state mandate or a state statute, or just to be an ear for you, to provide you feedback around problems of practice relating to policy. Many of the calls I get are usually the day of a board meeting when a policy is up for discussion with the board at a board meeting, and often it comes from the board chair, and I'm always here to help not only discuss the issue related to the policy, but also provide some ideas from my experience as a superintendent, but also to provide some strategies for helping facilitate the discussion around a policy at a board meeting. My point being that we're here to help you through the policy work that you're going to be engaged in. And so I also wanted to say, Patrice and Leonard started with this a bit, just that you're really taking on this responsibility at a consequential time in public education. And the issues that your board is facing are issues that the state is facing and our nation is facing. So we're dealing with a lot of the issues that are not just simply Windsor issues or Avon issues or Wethersfield issues. These are issues that are consistent with districts and within the state. And for that reason, we also provide a policy matters roundtable quarterly that follows our policy updates, where policy chairs and those interested in policy have a chance to engage in a webinar a lot like this, where I talk about some of the policies that are being updated, and also various members of engaged in this webinar can share things that are going on in their own district or policies that they're implementing that are making a difference for students. So the importance of policy is really around, if you think of policies as really the laws that are passed by you, the Board of Education, to guide decision-making in the district. And the critical piece around policy, Leonard mentioned the fact that you'll be at a board meeting and there'll be a lot of angry people at a board meeting, and you need to be empathetic to their concerns. The other thing that's really important is to have an awareness of the policy that may be at the center of the anger that people are bringing to the meeting. So be aware of that policy, know how the policy was developed, how long it's been in place, and be empathetic and listen to your community's concerns, because they might help guide current work in updating the policy. The policy may have been updated in the 1980s, for all you know, and there may be some really good important concerns being brought to your attention related to the policy. Of course, every board has a policy subcommittee, and the critical work of the policy updating work and policy development work will occur with the policy committee, because they'll get into the weeds of it. They'll be working with administration, bringing people in, listening to concerns. And then the board itself will deliberate over the policy. So it is a long deliberative practice, which anticipates the issues and also provides direction for decision-making prior to the heat of the moment meeting that was alluded to earlier. So you really want to take policies seriously. And it's also, I also want to say this on a personal level. Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, very few people wake up in the morning thinking, I really want to get really deeply in the weeds around policy. It's a lot of fun and it's really energizing. It's hard work. It is deliberative. It is time consuming. It is a lot of thinking and changing your views and getting the right word. It's all of that. So, but the importance of it can't be understated. As far as some of the issues that I've been working a lot on regarding policy, some of the things that are either hotly contested or things that are being changed as a result of mandates. It wouldn't surprise many of you that library book selection policies are closely monitored by community members, and boards have had a lot of questions, board members have had a lot of questions related to their policies, and I provided some updates through my department, looking at things like how are library books selected and by whom? How can books be challenged? And how is a challenge adjudicated? How do we ensure all students have opportunities to read and become engaged and learn about themselves and others? So that's a policy right now be closely monitored by boards, by community members. Title IX and the rights of those in protected class, those regulations are currently being redrafted by the federal government. And so we anticipate a significant change in the Title IX regulations. But specifically, those Title IX regulations will impact transgender and gender nonconforming youth. The new regulations providing guidelines around interscholastic athletic competition and student engagement. That will certainly be, those regulations will certainly have an impact on your communities. And we're working with, we're monitoring the progress of those regulations coming out. Artificial intelligence, AI, the CABE has developed a model policy around AI. And the critical piece here is how AI interfaces with the technology policy around social media, but also looks at the impact of teaching and learning and also relates to policies around cheating and plagiarism, but also sets a tone that advances student opportunities in districts to establish responsible practice. So as a policy department, we certainly are encouraging districts to engage in AI practice, but also establishing guidelines and best practices around AI, because we certainly want students to graduate from Connecticut high schools with experience in high-level experiences in technology, and AI right now is at the center of that conversation. Curriculum content related to American history, you'll hear a lot about how are history classes teaching critical issues around slavery, the impact of institutional racism, and how, so there'll be many conversations when curriculum committees meet around changes in social studies curriculum, changes in health curriculum, and how all of those curriculum are being changed and updated based on new practices, research, and new perspectives in our society. So that's certainly happening quite a bit. School climate policy is being updated and changed through state statutes. So we're currently working on a model policy around school climate policy, which gets into issues around bullying and what the state is now calling challenging behaviors. So boards of education will be engaged in the heavy lift of establishing and moving along and administering new school climate policies to ensure all students feel safe in the schools. Because if students don't feel safe, they're not learning to the level where they can learn. And that's the job of a board member, is to ensure that you're doing everything to ensure students are learning and maximizing what you're providing them. School safety is a critical issue that you'll be engaged in. There's policies related to school safety, specifically around school resource officers, which are a common practice in many schools. Some schools have metal detectors. There are policies around metal detectors, around safety drills, and many policies related to ensuring that schools are safe, physically safe environments for students. In terms of health and well-being, there are new policies related to school air quality and HVAC, and so you'll have to become acquainted in the board's responsibilities to ensure that students are in safe places, and that they are safe places for learning around, and that has to do with certainly school air quality and systems around that. The pandemic has raised our understanding of the importance of mental health, not only for students, but for staff as well. And so there are policies related to improving and to sustaining and improving mental health services for students. Public health has been a major issue as well around the pandemic, and there have been policies related to mask wearing, and school closings were not policy, but they came out of executive orders from the governor's office. Thankfully, we're no longer in a pandemic crisis mode. We're now dealing with COVID-19 as an endemic, which is back to listening to public health advice and taking precautions to ensure everyone's safety. But as far as mask wearing and school closings, those are no longer things that are being imposed currently in public schools. But I'm sure you're aware that they certainly did issues around mask wearing. If you had told me 10 years ago I would be engaged in major conflict around mask wearing, I never would have believed you until 2020, March of 2020. And special education funding and around ECS and other mechanisms around state funding and local funding. I certainly won't get into the weeds on that, but special education and programs for children receiving special education services, how those programs are funded will be a major source of this major area of conversation for you and your board. And of course, the last one, which will be again a heavy lift, but I think a good lift for districts, it will be around the new teacher leader evaluation and support guidelines. And I say that because I working on a model policy right now that responds to the new guidelines. It's really putting the energy and effort back into where it needs to be, improving teacher practice. So there have been many different iterations over the past 7 or 8 years around the teacher evaluation plan. It became very technical and highly contested. I look forward to the opportunity to policy now and guidelines that will get back to the main idea of teaching, which is to improve student lives, to improve student learning, and all the conversations around that with the leader, with the teacher, with the administrator, will be around improving teacher practice. So many of these issues have been, are, and can become hotly contested, and establishing policy through careful and thorough deliberation can be the difference between keeping your eye on the ball and improving teaching and learning and outcomes for all students, but also to get away from just simply chasing the shiny object. So while policy can seem like drudgery, creating good policies will keep the board, the district, the teachers focused on the important work of the district. And so, and again, as the senior policy associate, I look forward to working with you, answering your questions, and whether they're questions now or after you get elected, as you become acquainted with policies, we're here to help and ensure that you are doing the good work.
Thanks so much, Jody. That was terrific. Will Marie, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. Patrice, this is going back to what you discussed earlier. Can you give an example of a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest?
Absolutely. So a legal conflict of interest occurs when you would receive a benefit that is different from what the group as a whole receives. So for example, if you owned a cleaning company and you voted to award the school district contract to your cleaning company, that would be a legal conflict of interest. Now, there are many cases where, as a board member, there really is no legal conflict. Let's take the example, you know that you as a Board of Education member cannot be employed by the district that you serve on the board. However, you might have a family member that is employed by the district. So let's say your spouse is a teacher in the district and there's a collective bargaining agreement and the board is going to vote to approve that collective bargaining agreement. And your spouse will receive the same salary on wherever they fall on the salary schedule and the same benefits as every other employee covered by that collective bargaining agreement. So there is no legal conflict in that case. And most Board of Education members would go ahead and vote on the collective bargaining agreement. That is, however, a personal choice. If you felt that it would create a perception that you had a conflict, even though there was clearly no legal conflict, you might abstain from voting. Another example would be, let's say the board needs members to serve on the negotiating committee. Now, if your spouse is employed by the school district, you definitely would have a perceived conflict of interest, even though the result of those negotiations might not benefit your spouse more so than any other employee covered by the contract. Definitely there would be a perception there. And I saw I got a thumbs up from Leonard on that one. So those I think are a couple of examples. I don't know, Jody, if you want to add any from experiences you've had. You don't have to name the district or the board member.
Well, again, I think you hit some of the big ones. I know from experience that I was on a board where, or I was an administrator in a district where the board member had a relationship with, or a spouse who was involved with an insurance company, and there was discussion around changing the health insurance plan. And so that obviously became a hotly contested issue amongst staff members who perceived this as a conflict of interest. So things like that come up all the time, and I will say there's a policy for that.
Okay, so there's a suggestion that we spend a few minutes talking about the importance of approaching board service in a nonpartisan way. Even though you are elected through a partisan process, once the election is over, everyone should be committed to working together without any political agendas. I'm going to see if Leonard wants to opine on this issue.
Thank you for the question. So politics are local, and it depends on your local charter on how the politics play out. In Windsor, it's a 5-4 mandatory. That's the split, no matter what the representation is of the electorate. There's always a 5-4, with the 5 being the governing group. So the way we do it, everyone sits with their party. That's just the way our town charter calls for it, and it actually it works well for us. So there's some towns that you don't know who's a D, who's a R, who's an I. We understand that. It's definitely what your town and your town charter has the appetite for and how it operates. That's not to say what has worked now can't be changed and work better in the future. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that your local politics is what guides that particular process. So to get over that hump, obviously the leadership from both sides of the aisle need to come together and have some type of a civility and collaboration pact behind the scenes to say that, hey, this is how we're going to engage, this is how we're going to operate, this is how operation flow is going to do. It's that old adage, everyone loves sausage, but no one likes the process of making the sausage behind the scenes. And there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into a very civil and collaborative meeting on a weekly or monthly basis. So I say that to say this, it's the political will of the particular town and the board on what they need to engage upon and to come to some common ground and to understand that we are all there for children and the education of the children. If we can put it in that framework and then try to resolve our differences at that point, great. There's just going to be some differences you're not going to be able to solve, and unfortunately may spill over into your board meetings. It is what it is. The board chair would have to have that responsibility. He or she would have to manage the meeting and to make sure that the legal business of the board gets done in a way where you're not being FOI'd all over the place. So it's local politics, and I just wish you all the best. Some politics are good, some politics are not good. And if you need any support to manage that, guide through that, by all means, talk with your fellow board members in neighboring towns. Come CABE. You have 169 school districts that can be a person that we can lean on, we can vent towards, and really get some guidance, even from newbie board members, intermediate board members, as well as some seasoned board members that has been serving 20 and 30 years.
Thanks very much for that, Leonard. Well, Marie, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we do have a question here. This person says, I'm wondering if there are some quicker responses for how to explain some of what we have heard about today to a prospective voter. I feel like most people want to toss out a hot issue and want an answer about what I can do as a Board of Ed member or what the board will do.
All right, so I'll take that question. Thank you for the question, whomever posed it. As a board member, you have a right to have your opinions and about any particular topic. What we shouldn't do is have personal agendas and bring them to the forefront as the primary reason why you're on the board. So every board member should be well versed in what are the issues in your district, and you can be able to speak to, hey, what are you going to do to talk to us, talk about problems at a local level, and what are you going to do to talk to our state reps as well as our state senators, depending on how your district is aligned, to help you advocate for what your town or your city needs at the state level. So that's two levels of advocacy that as a board member, you're going to have to work through, as well as making sure that you try not to lose your personal identity and the reason why that you attempt to run for the board. So if you're looking for a quick elevator speech, it should be 30 seconds, quick hitting. You should be able to speak to the fact that, look, you're looking to work to increase, improve what's going on in town, that you're going to work to make sure that anyone that's elected that can legally help you to get your job done and to get appropriations and bills passed on your behalf. That is the focus of your work, and that it's not going to be solely done by me, but by a collective board of education that I'm going to have to work civilly and collaboratively with to make sure that it gets done. And I believe any rational or even irrational person will understand that you cannot do it alone and that you need to be in the room. And in order to get stuff done, it's going to take a huge level of compromise. A great contract is where everybody didn't get everything they wanted, but it solved the issue. And I think that's the mindset we should have.
If I could just add to that too, I think in terms of the elevator speech. The point I would try to make is that I'm looking to be elected onto a deliberative body. You're different than for example, in my previous community, there was a legislative council, and the council had they were representing specific areas of the community, and they were there to be the representative of the community. As a board member, you're going to be part of a deliberative body, and your charge is to advance the well-being, the interest in the well-being of every child that serves in the district under the Board of Education. So you may have particular points of view, particular political affiliation, but the bottom line is you're part of a deliberative body, and you need to be able to act as a member of that deliberative body and participate in the deliberation.
Thanks, Jody and Leonard. Are there additional questions, Will Murray?
Leonard, did you want to say something before?
No, I just wanted to make sure that I'm prepared to talk. That's all. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We don't have any other questions at this time, but before we end, I do want to bring everyone's attention to the handout section. We did upload some informational handouts for you. So please feel free to download those and print them if you'd like.
Right.
Thanks, Will Murray. Go ahead, Leonard.
On behalf of Elizabeth Brown and the president of CABE, as well as the board of directors, I want to thank everyone, the CABE staff, as well as all that are participating today for participating in this forum. It's very important that we prepare those that wish to serve in this important work of public education, that we provide the best resources as well as the most realistic expectation of what you can expect when you come into this work, and not to sell you a dream and then walk into a nightmare. It's hard work. It's rewarding work. It's work that doesn't happen during the typical first shift, 9 to 5. It happens on the weekends. You get pulled into meetings all the time. There's always something going on with the buildings that the superintendent need guidance at a moment's notice. It's a job where you're pretty much technically on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If something goes on any one of your campuses, or something has happened to a child, God forbid a child is injured or killed, those are the type of things that board members are pulled into by the superintendent to provide support and guidance, especially if you have to go in front of the press. So this is just not a typical, I can show up, serve a couple hours and walk away. It's a lifestyle change. I thank you for considering to be a Board of Education member, and I wish you nothing but the best as you go down this path. Thank you, Patrice.
Thanks so much, Leonard and Jody. And on behalf of the CABE staff and board of directors, we wish all of our participants a wonderful campaign season. Good luck.
Okay.